For 5 years, Nathan Caldwell believed his son was lost forever, until a new nurse shattered his hopelessness. Emma Sinclair saw what others couldn't. Oliver was still there, waiting to be reached. As music, love, and determination awaken the impossible, one question remains: can a miracle bring Oliver back? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Nathan Caldwell stood at the window of his Manhattan penthouse, staring at the city. Lights below. Another sleepless night, just like the hundreds before it. 5 years had passed since the accident that changed everything, but the pain felt as fresh as yesterday. "Mr. Caldwell?" His assistant Maria's voice came from the doorway. "The new nurse is here for the interview." Nathan didn't turn around. "Send her away, like all the others." "Sir, she's highly recommended. She's worked with long-term coma patients for—" "I said send her away." Nathan's voice cracked. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "Nobody can help Oliver. The doctors made that clear enough, but Maria didn't move. With all due respect, sir, this one's different. She specifically asked about Oliver's case. She studied his medical records." Nathan finally turned. The mention of his son's name always did that to him. "Fine. 5 minutes." Emma Sinclair wasn't what he expected. No fancy uniform, no briefcase full of credentials. Just a woman in simple scrubs, her brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and eyes that looked straight through his practiced intimidation. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, standing as he entered his home office. "Thank you for seeing me. Let's make this quick. You've seen Oliver's file?" "Yes. 17 years old. Severe brain trauma from a car accident. Multiple specialists have declared his condition permanent." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Then you know there's no hope. The position is simply to keep him comfortable until—" "I disagree." The words hit him like a slap. "Excuse me?" Emma stepped forward. "Show me to his room." "Miss Sinclair, now please." Something in her voice made Nathan lead her down the hallway. Oliver's room was exactly as it had been the day of the accident. Posters of his favorite bands on the walls, his guitar in the corner, gathering dust. And in the center, the hospital bed where his son lay, peaceful as if sleeping. Emma went straight to Oliver's side. She took his hand, and to Nathan's shock, she smiled. "Hello, Oliver. I'm Emma. I've heard so much about you. What are you doing?" "Talking to your son." She looked up at Nathan. "When was the last time you did that?" Nathan felt anger rise in his chest. "How dare you?" "The human brain is amazing, Mr. Caldwell. We don't fully understand it. But I've seen patients respond after years of silence. Not all of them wake up, but they're in there, they hear us, they feel us. The doctors said what they know, but they don't know everything." Emma turned back to Oliver. "Your dad tells me you played guitar. I bet you were amazing at it." Nathan watched, transfixed, as she spoke to Oliver like he was awake, like he could answer any moment. "I'll take the job," Emma said finally, "but on one condition." "Which is?" "You stop hiding in your office. Your son needs his father." Nathan should have thrown her out, should have called security. Instead, he found himself asking, "When can you start?" "Tomorrow morning." "And Mr. Caldwell?" Emma gathered her things. "Bring those old photos of Oliver's band. He'd like to hear about them." After she left, Nathan stood in Oliver's doorway for a long time. Then, slowly, he walked to his son's bedside. His hand shook as he reached for Oliver's. "Hey, buddy." He whispered, "I'm sorry I've been gone so long." And though Oliver didn't move, didn't blink, Nathan could have sworn the machines beeped just a little differently, like they were listening too. The first week with Emma was unlike anything Nathan had seen in 5 years. She arrived each morning with a new plan, a new approach. She played Oliver's favorite songs on a small speaker. She read him news about bands he used to love. She even convinced Nathan to bring in Oliver's old guitar. "Music therapy can work wonders," she explained, positioning Oliver's fingers on the strings. "The brain remembers patterns, rhythms. Sometimes it just needs a reminder." Nathan found himself lingering longer in Oliver's room, watching, hoping. Emma's energy was infectious. She talked to Oliver about everything, the weather, sports scores, funny stories from the hospital where she used to work. "You know," she said one evening, as Nathan brought her coffee. He has your smile. Nathan nearly dropped the mug. What? Look. Emma pointed to Oliver's face. When the sun hits him just right, you can see it. That little curve at the corner of his mouth, just like in those photos of you in his room. Nathan had never noticed. Had he really looked at his son so little these past years? The changes were subtle at first. A flutter of eyelids during music therapy, a slight increase in brain activity when Emma read to him. But it was the morning Nathan heard singing that changed everything. He'd come home early from a meeting, following the sound of a familiar tune. Emma was sitting by Oliver's bed singing Hey Jude, Oliver's favorite Beatles song, and there, so faint he thought he imagined it, Oliver's finger was tapping, just the smallest movement in perfect time with the music. Emma? Nathan breathed. Look, she smiled, never stopping the song. I know, he's been doing it for 2 days. I wanted to be sure before I told you. Nathan sank into a chair, his eyes fixed on that tiny movement. Is he? He's in there, Mr. Caldwell. He's fighting to come back to us. That night, Nathan cancelled all his meetings for the next week. He had more important things to do. He had 5 years of Beatles songs to catch up on. As winter turned to spring, Oliver's room transformed. Gone were the sterile medical charts and cold machinery. Now photos covered the walls. Oliver through the years, from a grinning toddler to a teenager with his beloved guitar. Emma had insisted on it. He needs to remember who he is, she'd said. We all do. Nathan found himself sharing stories he'd locked away for years. The time Oliver started a garage band that was so bad, the neighbors called the police. His first guitar lesson, where he broke 2 strings but refused to give up. The school talent show where he brought the house down with a punk rock version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Emma listened to every story, and somehow she always knew exactly what to say to Oliver afterward. Your dad's right here, Oliver. He's telling us about your rebel days. I bet you can't wait to show him how much your music has improved. The small signs kept coming. A twitch of fingers during a favorite song, elevated heart rate when Nathan talked about their old camping trips. And then, one rainy Tuesday, everything changed. Nathan was in the middle of a story about Oliver's 10th birthday when Emma suddenly grabbed his arm. Look, she whispered, a tear. A single tear was rolling down Oliver's cheek. That's just his eyes watering, Nathan said, but his voice shook. Emma shook her head. No. Watch his heart rate. Listen to his breathing. He's responding, Mr. Caldwell. He's hearing you. Nathan took his son's hand, his own vision blurring. Oliver, son, if you can hear me, if you're in there, we're right here. We're not giving up on you. Ever. The machines beeped steadily, but now Nathan heard what Emma had been talking about all along. It wasn't just noise. It was Oliver's way of talking back. That night, after Emma left, Nathan did something he hadn't done since the accident. He took out Oliver's old acoustic guitar, sat by his bed and played. He was rusty, his fingers fumbling over the chords of Hey Jude, but he didn't care. Remember when you tried to teach me? He said softly. You got so frustrated because I couldn't get the timing right, but you never gave up on me. He wiped his eyes. I'm sorry I almost gave up on you. The next morning, Emma arrived to find Nathan asleep in the chair, the guitar still in his lap, and Oliver's heart monitor showing the steadiest rhythm they'd seen in 5 years. The changes in Oliver's condition began to accelerate. His doctors, once so certain of their prognosis, now visited regularly, taking notes and shaking their heads in amazement. I've never seen anything like it, Dr. Roberts admitted. His brain activity is increasing weekly. The patterns we're seeing, it's as if he's trying to wake up. Emma took it all in stride, as if she'd known all along. She worked with Oliver for hours each day, guiding his hands over piano keys, helping him feel the rhythm of music he'd once played so effortlessly. Nathan watched them together, saw how naturally Emma understood what Oliver needed. She knew when to push and when to let him rest. She celebrated every tiny victory, a finger movement, a change in breathing, a tear, like it was a miracle. And maybe it was. The first word came on a Sunday morning. Nathan was reading the sports section aloud, another of Emma's ideas, when a sound stopped him mid-sentence. D. The paper fell from his hands. "Oliver?" "D, Dad." It was barely a whisper, rough from years of silence, but it was there. Real, undeniable. Emma was already hitting the call button, her professional calm cracking as tears streamed down her face. "That's it, Oliver. You're doing it. Keep trying." Nathan couldn't move, couldn't breathe. 5 years of silence shattered by a single word. His son's voice, calling for him. The room filled with medical staff, all talking at once, checking vitals, shining lights in Oliver's eyes. But Nathan heard none of it. He just held his son's hand, feeling the weak but deliberate pressure as Oliver held back. Hours later, when the excitement had died down and the doctors had finished their examinations, Emma stood in the doorway watching father and son. "I told you he was in there," she said softly. Nathan looked up at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time. This woman who had refused to accept defeat, who had brought music and hope back into their lives, who had believed in Oliver when everyone else had given up. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For everything." Emma smiled. "Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. Oliver's got a lot of work ahead of him." Nathan corrected. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us." The months that followed Oliver's first word were filled with intense therapy sessions, small victories, and occasional setbacks. Every day brought new challenges, but also new hope. Oliver's progress was slow but steady. Words came back gradually, simple ones at first, then short sentences. His fingers remembered chords on the guitar before they could manage a fork. Music, it seemed, was still the key to unlocking his memories. Emma was there through all of it, her dedication unwavering. She worked with the physical therapists, learned exercises to help Oliver regain strength, and somehow always knew exactly what he needed, whether it was encouragement, rest, or just someone to listen to his frustrations. Nathan watched in amazement as his son emerged from the darkness piece by piece. The doctors called it a miracle. The press wanted interviews. But inside the Caldwell penthouse, they focused on the small moments that really mattered. The first time Oliver smiled, really smiled, at one of his father's bad jokes. The day he managed to strum a complete chord on his guitar. The morning he looked at Emma and said, clear as day, "You never gave up on me." Nathan found himself looking forward to Emma's arrival each morning, missing her calm presence in the evenings when she left. She had become more than Oliver's nurse. She was part of their family. One night, after a particularly good therapy session, Nathan found Emma on the balcony, staring at the city lights. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked, joining her. "I was just thinking about the first day I came here," she said. "How angry you were, how lost." "I was scared," Nathan admitted, scared to hope. And now, he looked back through the window where Oliver was sleeping peacefully. Not in a coma, just normal, healing sleep. "Now I'm scared for different reasons," he said softly. Emma turned to him. "What do you mean?" "I'm scared of what happens when he doesn't need a nurse anymore, when you have to leave." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Emma's eyes widened slightly, then softened. "Nathan," she said, using his first name for the first time, "I didn't stay all these months just because I'm a nurse." He took her hand, and this time there was no pretense of professional distance, no hiding behind titles or roles. "Stay," he whispered. "Not as a nurse, as you, as part of this family." Emma's answer was in her eyes, in the way she squeezed his hand, in the tear that slipped down her cheek. Inside, Oliver smiled in his sleep, as if he'd known all along that this was how their story would end. Summer arrived in a burst of warmth and possibility. Oliver's recovery had progressed to the point where he could sit up on his own, feed himself, and even take a few steps with support. But it was his spirit that showed the most remarkable recovery. The sullen teenager from the photos was gone, replaced by a young man who appreciated every moment, every small victory. He worked tirelessly in therapy, pushed himself to regain his strength, and never complained about the long road ahead. "You know what I remember most?" he asked Emma one afternoon during their exercises. "Your voice. Even when I couldn't move, Couldn't speak, I heard you. You talked to me like I was still here. Emma blinked back tears. You were still here. I always knew that. Nathan, watching from the doorway, felt his heart swell. The bond between Oliver and Emma was special. Not quite mother and son, but something equally deep and precious. The changes in the penthouse reflected their evolving family dynamic. Emma's books appeared on the shelves. Her favorite coffee mug had a permanent place in the kitchen. Her laughter filled the rooms that had been silent for so long. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Oliver practicing chords on his guitar, Emma and Nathan playing cards, Oliver stopped playing abruptly. "Dad," he said, "when are you going to ask Emma to marry you?" Nathan choked on his coffee. Emma dropped her cards. "Oliver!" they both exclaimed. He grinned, that familiar mischievous smile they'd missed for so long. "What?" "I'm just saying what we're all thinking. You love her, Dad." "And Emma," he turned to her, his expression serious. "You love him too, I can tell." Emma started, then stopped, her face flushing. Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly everything was clear. All the moments they'd shared, all the times their hands had brushed reaching for the same thing, all the late-night conversations on the balcony. They'd been falling in love so gradually they hadn't even noticed. "He's right," Nathan said, softly. "I do love you, Emma. I think I have for a long time." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too. Both of you. You've become my family." Oliver set his guitar aside. "Well, what are you waiting for, Dad? Get down on one knee already." Nathan laughed, but he was already moving, already reaching for Emma's hand. There would be time later for a proper proposal, with a ring and romantic dinner. But this moment, imperfect, unexpected and completely them, was perfect in its own way. "Emma Sinclair," he said, kneeling before her chair, "will you marry us, both of us? Will you make our family official?" Emma looked from Nathan to Oliver and back again, her smile brighter than any diamond could be. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, to both of you, to all of it." Oliver whooped from his chair, then promptly tried to stand to hug them. They both rushed to steady him, ending up in a group hug that had them all laughing and crying at the same time. Just when everything seemed perfect, the past came knocking at their door. Sarah Thompson, Oliver's mother and Nathan's ex-wife, suddenly reappeared after 6 years of absence. "I saw the news about Oliver's recovery," she said, standing in their living room in her expensive designer clothes. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Nathan stood protectively between her and Oliver's room. "You lost the right to know when you walked out on us, when you said you couldn't handle having a sick child." Sarah's perfectly made-up face crumpled slightly. "I was young, I was scared, I've changed. Mom?" Oliver's voice came from behind them. He stood in the doorway, leaning on his walker, Emma close behind him for support. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oliver, oh, my baby." She rushed forward, but Oliver took a step back, pressing closer to Emma. "Don't," he said quietly. "Just don't. But I'm your mother." "A mother doesn't leave," Oliver said, his voice stronger now. "A mother stays, like Emma stayed, like Emma believed in me when everyone else gave up." Sarah's eyes darted between Emma and Oliver, then narrowed. "I see, so you've replaced me with the nurse. How convenient." "Emma's not replacing anyone," Nathan cut in. "She earned her place in this family. She's going to be my wife and Oliver's stepmother because she chose us, just like we chose her." "We'll see about that," Sarah snapped. "I still have rights." "I'll call my lawyers. I'm 18 now, Mom," Oliver interrupted. "I can choose. For myself, and I choose them. Please leave." Sarah stood frozen for a moment, then grabbed her designer purse. "This isn't over," she warned as she stormed out. That night, Emma found Oliver sitting at his piano, playing softly. "Are you okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Yeah," he said, not stopping his playing. "You know what's funny? When I was in the coma, I could hear everything. I heard Dad crying. I heard the doctors giving up. But I never once heard her voice. Not in all those years." Emma put her arm around him and he leaned into her embrace. "But I heard you," he continued. "Every story, every song, every time you told me to keep fighting. You became my mother in all the ways that really matter." In the doorway, Nathan watched them, his heart full. Sarah's threats didn't scare him. They were a family, bound by something, stronger than blood or law. They were bound by choice, by love, and by the miracle that had brought them together. Despite Sarah's threats, life moved forward. Oliver continued his recovery, now walking with just a cane, and even starting to play short sets on his guitar. The wedding plans progressed, with Oliver insisting on performing during the ceremony. The big day arrived on a perfect spring morning. They chose to have it in the penthouse garden, where Oliver had spent countless hours during his therapy sessions. The space was transformed with white flowers and fairy lights, but kept small and intimate, just like their family. Emma got ready in Oliver's room, which still had some of the photos from his recovery on the walls. "Are you nervous?" Oliver asked, adjusting his bow tie as he sat in the chair by her vanity. "A little," she admitted, smoothing her simple white dress. "Good nervous, though." "You know what I think?" Oliver said, grinning. "I think this was meant to be. Maybe that's why I held on for so long. I was waiting for you to find us." Emma hugged him carefully, mindful of both their outfits. "I think you held on because you're the strongest person I know. Now, are you sure you're up for playing? Try and stop me," he laughed. "I've been practicing for months." The ceremony was everything they'd dreamed of. Nathan couldn't take his eyes off Emma as she walked down the aisle. Oliver played a beautiful acoustic version of Hey Jude, their song, the one that had helped bring him back. But the most touching moment came during the vows. "Emma," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion, "you didn't just save my son, you saved me. You taught me how to hope again, how to live again, how to love again." "Nathan," Emma responded, tears streaming down her face, "you and Oliver aren't just my family now. You've always been my family. I felt it from that first day when everyone said there was no hope. You taught me that miracles happen, not just in medicine, but in love too." Then Oliver stood, a bit shaky but determined, and pulled out a piece of paper. "I have something to say too," he announced. "Emma, you never gave up on me. When I was lost in the darkness, your voice was my light. You weren't looking for a family when you came here, but you created one. You made us whole again, and Dad?" He turned to Nathan with a smile. "Thank you for letting her in, for being brave enough to hope again. I love you both so much." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden as they exchanged rings. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Oliver started playing again. This time a song he'd written himself about second chances and the power of love. At the reception, Nathan held Emma close as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. Oliver sat at the piano playing softly, his smile bright enough to light up the entire room. "Look at him," Emma whispered. "Did you ever imagine 5 years ago that we'd be here?" Nathan kissed her forehead. "I never imagined I could be this happy again. You gave me back my son and you gave me your heart. How did I get so lucky?" "We all got lucky," Emma said, watching as Oliver's girlfriend helped him up from the piano for a dance of his own. "We found each other when we needed it most." The months after the wedding brought more changes and challenges. Sarah's lawyers did try to cause trouble, but Oliver's testimony about his mother's abandonment, combined with his legal adult status, quickly ended that threat. Oliver started taking online college courses, determined to make up for lost time. His recovery continued to amaze his doctors, though some things, like his slight limp, would likely be permanent. "But hey," he joked during one of his checkups, "it gives me character, makes me look distinguished." Emma had officially retired from nursing to focus on their family, but she still volunteered at the hospital, working with coma patients and their families. She started a support group, sharing their story to give others hope. Nathan found himself working less and less, preferring to spend time with his family. The business still thrived, but it no longer consumed him. He had found something far more valuable than money could buy. One evening, as they sat in the garden watching the sunset, Oliver playing his guitar softly in the background, Emma shared some news that would change their lives once again. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly, squeezing Nathan's hand. The joy on Nathan's face was matched only by Oliver's whoop of delight when they told him he was going to be a big brother. "This is awesome," he exclaimed. "I can teach them guitar and tell them stories and—" He paused, suddenly serious. "I can tell them about how their mom saved my life." Emma hugged him tight. "You saved yourself, Oliver. I just believed in you." "We all saved each other," Nathan said, wrapping his arms around both of them. "That's what families do." 5 years to the day after Emma first walked into their lives, the Caldwell penthouse was once again filled with music and laughter. Oliver, now 23, played his guitar while his 3-year-old sister Hope danced around him. "Again, Ollie," she demanded when he finished. "Play my song." Your song was the lullaby Oliver had composed when she was born. A gentle melody that combined elements of all their favorite songs. Emma watched from the couch, her hand resting on her growing belly. Their second miracle was due in just a few months. Nathan sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, marveling at how full their lives had become. "Remember when you thought there was no hope?" Emma teased him gently. "I remember everything," he said, kissing her softly. "I remember. The way you walked in here and changed our whole world." Oliver lifted Hope onto his lap, showing her how to strum the guitar strings. His hands, once frozen in a coma, now moved smoothly over the frets. His voice, which doctors said might never work again, sang softly to his baby sister. "Daddy," Hope called. "Come sing with us!" Nathan joined his children, sitting on the floor despite his expensive suit, adding his voice to theirs. Emma watched, her heart so full it might burst. They had all been broken in their own ways, Nathan by grief, Oliver by trauma, Emma by loneliness. But together, they had healed each other. They had created something beautiful from their pain as the sun set over the city, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The Caldwell family sang together, their voices joining in perfect harmony. Their song was one of hope, of love, of second chances. And somewhere in the hospital where it all began, other families were finding their own hope, inspired by the story of a nurse who refused to give up, a father who learned to believe again, and a boy who fought his way back to life. The end.